Welcome to episode 5 of Bloggers Are Weird. I am your host, DJ Paris of thoughtsfromparis.com. Today I am really pumped because we have a blogging hero on the show. The fantastic, controversial, sweet, and also famous Cecily Kellogg from uppercasewoman.com. She is a true legend, and you will soon find out why, although you probably already know. We have just launched bloggersareweird.com, which hosts every single episode of the show. You can listen to each episode multiple times. Don't do multiple times. You should have other things to do. But listen at least once, and you can do that instantly on the website. If you'd like to subscribe to the show, find us on iTunes, on Zune, on BlackBerry, on your favorite podcast app for Android. Oh, and we're also on Stitcher. We are literally everywhere. And I shouldn't say we because it's just me. I do it all. But so does Aisha Tyler for her podcast. I don't know why I just compared myself to Aisha Tyler, as she's way funnier and infinitely more successful than me. But my point is, okay, so no points coming to mind right now. But please subscribe, support our sponsors, and enjoy the show. Oh, and tell at least one person who reads blogs about Bloggers Are Weird. You sort of owe it to me. You know you do. Yeah. Yes, you do. All right, go grab a Harvey Wallbanger or whatever your drug of choice is. Mine is the theater-sized box of Good and Plenty's, and enjoy. Today's podcast is sponsored by romance-text.com. Looking to reignite the passion in your relationship? You have to check out romance-text.com. This is how to use text messages to bring back the passion and reignite the spark you once had. Now, if you're thinking this sounds cheesy, or maybe it's just learning how to send dirty text messages, it's actually not. This program by relationship expert Michael Fiore has been featured in over 200 television and radio shows. This program has a money-back guarantee, is normally $97, but listeners of Bloggers Are Weird get a special price of only $47 for the entire program. By purchasing the program, you help support this show. Visit romance-text.com and get the passion back. So that controversial post, did that go up yesterday over on Babbel or 2 days ago?
Yesterday.
I love the fact that 3 different people had the exact same comment.
Well, yeah. That really isn't so much about it's not 3 different people. It's somebody being impatient with the approval system that Babbel has in place for comments.
Yeah, and clearly they were just trying to get the same message across with 3 fake profiles, which I loved.
Yes.
It's the power of every forum, and forums ultimately mostly devolve over time and just become a place of negativity, I found.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been on some forums that were helpful, but they were very specific, so.
By the way, I'm speaking with Cecily Kellogg, the famous honest and I would say accidentally controversial person who I've always admired and respected. Oh, I want to tell you how I first heard about you. This is kind of a funny story. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned. So I was at BlogHer, and I was in these first day, I forget what it's called, the first day track, where you're in basically one. You must have been in a different one, but I was in this meeting for 3 hours, and there was a bunch of big-time bloggers in there, which I knew none of them because I don't know anybody. And at the end of the 3 hours, one of the things we got to do was ask for help that we needed with something. And so the thing I asked for is I said, well, I'd like to get some more advertisers to my site. And your friend Dresden raised her hand, and I didn't know Dresden, but Dresden was a big deal all right, I'm going to start that over again. Meepers. Sorry about that. Meepers. So your friend Dresden was in... Hold on. Meepers. Sorry. So your friend Dresden was in the room, and she was the person in the room everyone respected and admired, and she just piped up and said, have you read Cecily's piece on getting a media kit together? So I said, no, but I was so embarrassed I didn't know who Cecily was because 40 people in the room all nodded their heads simultaneously oh, yes, you have to read the Cecily piece. So I'm writing down in my book, I'm writing Cecily. SS, and I didn't know if that's like your name. I didn't know if that's like a screen name. I didn't know if it was a Twitter account. I was so embarrassed. I was about to turn to Deb Rocks and say, who is Cecily a person? Is that, I didn't know who it was. And then of course, then I of course found out who you are, and I went, oh my God. But I didn't know anybody at the time, so it was kind of funny. But, so what are you going to read for us today?
This is a post I wrote a couple of days ago called Fireweed.
All right, go ahead.
I've always been loud. I spent much of my younger life living brashly and aggressively. I was the kind of girl that beat up the boys that would say things like, women are bad drivers, because my mom taught me that people that said shit like that needed to be shouted down. Naturally, the boys would just say it more often, so I'd chase them around the school. My 7th grade yearbook had an amusing entry from a kid named Dawn that said, to the girl that always hit me with her dumb cast when she didn't like what I said. That was me. Somewhere in high school and my early 20s, that voice dwindled, mostly because I wasn't sure who I was and because alcohol was clouding my opinion of myself. Not to mention the strange and twisted ways of early love, the way a young girl can disappear into a relationship and say things like, yes, sure, I think Pink Floyd is awesome, or The Who really moved me, or yes, flannel is a great look for me, I'd love to wear your shirt. It took sobriety to give me back to myself. It took sobriety to grow up, to learn who it was exactly I saw in the mirror. It took sobriety for me to realize how much of who I thought I actually was came from other people. It also took sobriety for me to realize that I was an asshole and I needed to stop hitting people with my cast when I didn't like what they had to say. That instead I had to listen because in fact they just might know what they are talking about and that they had a right to believe in what they needed to believe in. It took blogging for me to learn that words were singing in me, that I had the ability to tell a story and tell it true. I've learned, in the near decade I've been doing this thing, how to tell my story without stamping on the stories of others. I've grown up here on this site. I've become a good writer because of this blog, and I've been sharing my personal truth here with deep joy and gratitude for a long fucking time. Do you know what fireweed is? It's a gorgeous plant that has these incredible stalks of bright pink and purple blossoms. They love acidic soils, so they are often the first thing to grow in a forest that's been decimated by fire. They are the harbinger of hope, proof that no matter how badly something burns down, something new can grow again. Blogging for me has been fireweed. It seeded the life that was burned to nothing after losing my sons. It has gifted me with so much joy and love and hope. It has made me the mother I am to my daughter. It's made me a writer. It's made my life whole. Things are changing and shifting in my life again, in good ways and in bad. I have many challenges to face down right now, some of which are not at my own hand and are directly related to blogging. I've worked hard to shake it off, to rise above, to move on, but I've felt mired lately. I've felt far more immersed in ash than in new growth. Fires set by others have been looking at my heels for 2 years now, and I've let those fires overpower my voice. I am not willing to let that be the case anymore. My goal for January is to get unstuck. It's rather terrifying. Some plans I've made have to change, and I liked those plans. I felt very focused and centered and ready, but we can't control much, well, fucking anything really, and I have to bend so I don't break. Luckily, at 44 years old, I know that these periods where everything burns down lead to new growth every single time. It's hard to remember this while standing in the flames, that I will soon move to standing in the flowers. This is what I'm holding on to right now.
Cool. If you're not familiar with Cecily K., she is a longtime blogger, very, very well known in the community. Babbel has ranked her, probably every year they've been around. I think just recently she's been in the top 10 of all blogs for best written, most controversial, although I don't really understand that but you are ranked highly for most confessional, and I think, confessional oftentimes leads to controversy because, we all hide behind our secrets, and the fact that you don't, I think, is what people consider controversial. Do you find that that's true?
I'm not sure what it is. I think that a lot of my title of being controversial has to do with my political stance and my experience with my sons that has led me to become an advocate for choice. And I think kind of that's where I've gotten my controversial reputation. it is true that lately now the controversial has been more about who I am as a person, because there are an awful lot of people who, I don't know, disagree with that. I guess I'm not really sure.
How did you start blogging?
I started blogging. I'd heard of blogs, of course, for a while by the time that I read my first personal blog. But I really hadn't, most of the blogs that people were talking about in, the early 2000s, which is a strange thing to say, were mostly political or gaming related or tech related. I didn't know much about blogs written by women. And I was in actually a forum, one of the forums that really helped me a lot, called Fertility Friend, which was a place for people who were trying to get pregnant to support each other. And somebody in one of the groups, I think it was actually the sperm donor group, which I tended to hang out with a lot because they were all a bunch of gay women that were really cool. And one of them linked to 3 blogs. She linked to Deuce's blog, which Deuce is kind of given the name of being the first mom blogger, a blog called Chez Miscarriage, which sadly is defunct, but it's still the best blog I've ever read, and a blog called A Little Pregnant. And I had no idea that there were women that were sharing their personal narratives in the way that those women were doing it. And it just completely opened up my eyes. And then I read them all. I devoured all 3 of their blogs from the archives all the way back to where they were in 2003, 2004. And then I also read another dozen or so blogs that I found through them. And it wasn't long till I wanted to start my own blog. I've been a writer forever, but I was a poet more than a narrative kind of a nonfiction writer. But it very quickly became my favorite form of writing, and I have abandoned poetry completely, which is a shame, because poetry is definitely the way to fame and fortune. So.
Right. I wrote a poetry book way back when I was like 20, and I just thought in my mind as a 20-year-old, I am going to make so much money, and I made no money. So, that's pretty funny. But how has your blog changed over the years?
Well, it was originally called "And I Wasted All That Birth Control," and was, the incredible, agony of infertility and the whole struggling to do that, because when you're in the middle of dealing with infertility, it's very consuming. It's all consuming. And I changed after I finally gave birth to my daughter in 2006. I didn't obviously want to talk about infertility anymore. I mean, part of it is literally a kind of infertility PTSD where I just wanted to move on. And that's when I decided to change the name of my blog to Uppercase Woman. But I did it with the support of my readers. I actually held a contest where I asked them for suggestions, and then I picked my top 5 that I liked the most, and I had them vote on which one. And the one they chose was Uppercase Woman, which is actually a suggestion by my husband, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, tell us what that means.
Well, have you heard of what the root of calling letters uppercase and lowercase is?
Not unless it was taught on television. So no.
In the early days of the printing press, when they would set the letters that before they put them into the press to print something, they had uppercase letters above the lowercase letters. So that's why they were upper and lower. And I like it because for me, I think my blog is primarily about reaching up. But on the other hand, the side thing is, of course, on the internet, if you type in all caps, you're yelling. So it goes being loud and reaching up at the same time. So.
Yeah, that's really clever. I like that. We can thank Gutenberg then for your title. I think he was the printing press guy. So talk a little bit about, you're very open about your family, and you talk very honestly about some of the struggles you have as well as some of the celebration. How has that impacted your family? Are they supportive of you revealing things about, your personal situation, or are there boundaries that you've put in place? How does that work?
Absolutely, there are some boundaries. My husband, I don't write about the fights that I have with my husband or arguments or problems we have in marriage. Not that we have a lot, but there's certainly, we've been together 20 years. There are ups and downs. I don't write much about our sex lives, although that might change. I don't write about things like, my daughter just came into the room, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Things like, things that are private that I don't want to talk about my daughter. I do tell stories about my daughter, but there's so much that I leave out, good and bad. And I also, I write a lot about my mom too, because she lives with us and because, she's really the biggest other part of my family, and she knows what I write about and understands it and is supportive. The only time I've really hit a problem is my father has other children, and I have written about my father and about his funeral and things like that in a way that they found hurtful. And those posts I did end up taking down. It was, it's a very hard, our relationship is really hard work. There are now 5 of us, trying to make it all work when we didn't grow up together and don't know each other very well. So I wrote my first vent after my dad's funeral, and they freaked out. So I took the post down out of respect for them.
Yeah, it's one of those things I found that you oftentimes you're just, or at least if you're like me, you don't know that you're going to hurt somebody until they're hurt. And it's unfortunate, but it's just one of those things where oftentimes you don't know where someone's sensitivities are. And then, I've had to go back and remove some stuff as well, and just wouldn't have occurred to me that it was going to cause a problem.
Yeah, and I think I didn't really think that my sisters knew about my blog or had read it, and so I was taken aback by that, both flattered and surprised. But yeah, I've probably more likely regretted tweets, because Twitter is such a fast and furious, place that it's easy to just toss something out and not realize that it wasn't nice. But I honestly have not been told very much that I've hurt people with what I've written.
Yeah, well, I know you I wouldn't say I know you super well, but I know you enough I think I would have smelled anything that had the scent of somebody trying to hurt somebody intentionally. I mean, I've just never seen that side of you, if there is that side of you. So I wouldn't suspect you have hurt a lot of people through your honesty. If anything, it was probably accidental.
My honesty makes a lot of people uncomfortable. There's many, many people who believe that I cross lines that shouldn't be crossed in talking about my family online.
Well, I think that's the case of every successful blogger, so that must mean you've made it. So congratulations there. When people start telling you you're doing something wrong, I think that's obviously nobody wants that sort of criticism or even feedback, because now we have to ignore it or take it in and figure out what to do with it. But they're not saying that about people who aren't making some sort of difference out there, I think. So I think that's ultimately a positive, at least to be noticed in that way. Whether you want the attention or not, I guess.
It's hard, but I have to say, it's kind of cold comfort. You're doing
sure.
That's why people hate you. It's like, great! That's awesome. But I have to say this, that, my daughter's observing how loudly I'm talking. I do think that I have a lot of different thoughts about the subject, but I think it's really important to remember that social media is still so young. The internet is still so young. This is all new territory. And it's very, and we're all figuring out where the boundaries are as it happens. But I also think that it's important to remember that bloggers are not the first people to overshare about their lives. I mean, Proust wrote a book that had whole chapters dedicated to him turning over in bed. Like, you could not get more intimate than that writing that he did. And Irma Bombeck wrote about her family, and Dave Barry, and there have been writers, the guy who wrote Peter Pan based it on his niece, and, Christopher Robin, the kid that was Christopher Robin was based on in Winnie the Pooh, grew up to complain about his dad writing about him. This is not new, this kind of like oversharing, but the only difference being that blogging provides a specific opportunity for people to respond to that sharing publicly.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis wrote a great book called A Grief Observed, which is his sort of journey after his wife died, and the diary he kept and how difficult it is. And it is about as honest and raw as I could imagine. And now it's taught in basic college English courses. And so I think at the end of the day...
Comment section.
Yeah. Well, exactly. At the end of the day, the proof is in the content. And if the content's good and has quality, then it gets attention and people read it and then they make up some sort of decision whether they like it or not. But, people don't come back if the content isn't there. And I think the fact that Babbel rates you as one of the top 10 best female bloggers on the internet is something to say, to be said for the quality of your work. And ultimately that probably, I imagine, means a lot to you, that you're recognized in that fashion.
It does. And I have to say, I'm not in the top 10 by Babbel's stretch. I'm in the top 100.
Oh, well, I'm looking at a list right now that says best written number 7. Must be maybe it's a list from a few years ago, but
I didn't end up on their list till 2011. So.
Oh, gotcha. Well, either way, I'll say you're in my top 10, but that's not me being nice, but I actually think you're one of the best writers that I've found. Tell us about. I know you're working on a book. Tell us about that.
It's not all that interesting. It's very early stages, but it's a pretty traditional, inspirational memoir kind of thing. And I'm working very hard on it being different from my blog, kind of operating. I was really struck and impressed with, how the bloggess, Jenny Lawson, did writing her book, which is, if you haven't read it, it's absolutely one of the best books out there written by a blogger. And also Heather Armstrong, recently published a book that was a collection of the essays that she'd written to her daughter on her blog that she'd then kind of edited and changed a little bit. And those are the bloggers that have inspired me and making that jump from blog to book. So I'm hoping to follow in their shoes, but I don't really know if it'll ever be published. I don't know if I have that kind of power or whatever, but I'm really happy to be writing it. It's nice to write in a form that's so different from blogging. It's much less conversational writing a book than it is writing a blog post.
Yeah, I'm in the process of starting that. I'll just be self-publishing because I don't think I've got the attention of a Jenny Lawson audience. Yeah, I know I don't. But
that's the attention of a Jenny Lawson audience. I will not sell as many books as Jenny Lawson.
Well, nobody will at this point that I know either. But she's a great example too. She's such an inspiration to me as well, about somebody who can actually do something exciting with her blog over time. And I know none of this happens overnight. So it is exciting to see somebody who is a better writer than myself, but see somebody really go to number 1 on Amazon, for best comedy or humor, whatever it was. That's pretty cool that a blogger can do that. And I think our roles are changing, and people are starting to pay a lot more attention to what's being written online.
Heather Armstrong's been on the bestseller list. Jill Smokler, who is Scary Mommy, it's her blog, has been on the bestseller list. I mean, there's a lot of bloggers that have made that leap successfully. So, we certainly have plenty of examples to show us the way.
Yeah, and it's so cool because whether you self-publish or you go through traditional media, you can get the word out there just like through a blog, and you can sell it yourself if you want to, or go through and do a book tour with one of the big publishing firms. But it's still so cool. This didn't exist when I was younger, and I guess to none of us. So what's next for you? Just going to keep your head down and keep writing, or I know you speak at how many conferences a year? It's a ton.
Last year I think it was something like 14 or 15. A lot of them were local though, and not, I didn't have to travel that much for them. I don't know how many I'm going to speak at this year. I'm trying to tone my schedule down a little bit, and I'm trying, I'd like to be home a little bit more. And I mostly have gone to conferences representing companies that I've been working with, and I really kind of want to get there on my own steam now instead of representing a company while I'm, at a blogging conference. I'd like to just be Cecily instead of Cecily who works for blah, blah, blah.
Well, yeah, but you're also being modest because the reality of it is you could get to just about any. I just came back from Blog World, and you would definitely be able to speak at Blog World, and they don't take just anyone, obviously. So
Here.
Yeah, in fact, you have spoken at Blog World. You were there at LA. So I guess with that, I know you've got a heart out and you've got lunch and you've got places to go and family to spend time with. I know I so appreciate you for the little time we had together on a Sunday. I know it is not the most fun day to do something like this. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm off to shopping.
And everyone, if you're not familiar, although you probably already are, go visit uppercasewoman.com. That's Cecily's private blog, personal blog, and not private, very public, as well as she has a column on Babbel. Are you writing anywhere else right now, or just primarily Babbel?
I have a couple more articles that are going to come out on Women & Co. and probably more there in the future, I'm hoping. And I have, I think that's kind of it, though, right now, yeah.
And then also follow her on Twitter, Cecily K. It's CECILYK. And I'm sure you're on Facebook as well. In fact, I know you're on Facebook. So follow her. You probably are already. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks.
All right. Say goodbye, Cecily.
Bye.